One day, about 13 years ago now, I was introduced to the game The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. At 10 years old, it was the first real major video game that I had ever played, and honestly, I was far too young to really understand it. But regardless, I was absolutely hooked. I can vividly remember my first moments in the game, choosing to play as an Argonian because they reminded me of dinosaurs, exiting the sewers for the first time. Still, the one moment that I will never forget, as simple and meaningless as it may seem, was running into a deer on that first journey to Wandon Priory. At that exact moment, it hit my 10-year-old brain that I was not just playing a video game, but I was part of another world, almost just like our own. I had played some other video games on my phone, on my beloved V-Smile console, and some Wii classics like Mario Kart, but something about Oblivion just hit different. In Cyrodiil, I could do whatever I wanted. If I wanted to just walk around the vast forests and enjoy the wilderness, I could do that. If I wanted to collect my own stash of pumpkins to drop in Jensen's shop, I could do that. If I wanted to murder everyone in the market district just for fun, I could do that too. Since then, I've never truly stopped playing. Sure, maybe I've taken some breaks for a few months every now and then, but I don't think a year has gone by that I haven't started a new playthrough or continued an old one. However, recently I've found myself wondering, why do I like Oblivion so much? Is it just nostalgia, or is it really as good as I remember it being when I first played it all those years ago? In this video essay, I will investigate the many aspects of Oblivion to answer that exact question. First, I'll tackle some of the negatives about the game, then come back with the positive to see if they're really able to overcome Oblivion's issues. Really, to get it out of the way more than anything else, let's just talk first about the combat system. No doubt, when discussing Elder Scrolls and Bethesda Game Studios or older games in general, this is one of the first things that people may say turn them off from the game. And though it is certainly a major improvement upon its predecessor Morrowind's dice rolling system, I really can't offer much of a defense for Oblivion's combat. At the end of the day, it really is just pointing at something and either slashing, casting a spell, or maybe firing an arrow at it. On top of that, almost all enemies functioning the exact same way, with you both attacking each other until the enemy eventually falls dead. If they are a ranged enemy, you may get a little extra challenge in trying to dodge their projectiles, but that's about it. And that leads to perhaps what is really the weakest part of Oblivion, and that's its leveling system. See, as you level up, enemies gain health way faster than players can increase their damage output, making combat feel even worse, as at the highest levels you can often hit enemies dozens of times before they finally die, especially if you can't keep your weapon's enchantment charged up. This is all caused by the way that Oblivion's leveling system works. Without going too deep into the details, put simply, Oblivion expects you to level more efficiently than what is really possible in normal play. This leads to an effect in which slowly but surely, enemies increase their damage and health more quickly than the player, to a point at which one is forced to either suffer from terribly boring fights against tank enemies, or gradually decrease the difficulty slider. Luckily, the recently released remaster fixes some of these issues, as you are now able to always increase your attributes by 12 points per level, which leads to more efficient leveling than what you would often achieve playing normally in the original game. And really, it's hard to argue against these flaws. Without a doubt, they do hold the game back in some ways, and they are seemingly the things that Bethesda made the most effort to improve upon in the next Elder Scrolls entry, Skyrim. So if these flaws do exist, then why would I still enjoy Oblivion so much? Put simply, it's the world that Bethesda created and how they enabled players to truly inhabit it. The second you emerge from the tutorial sewers, you're hit with the sight of a world that can only be described as dreamlike. The bright blue skies, Vivid green foliage and soft textures give Oblivion such a unique appearance, making it look almost like a painting. Yes, the graphical resolution has not aged particularly well in almost 20 years since its launch, but Oblivion doesn't try to look realistic like Skyrim does. It embraces its art style, using it to help pull you into the fantasy setting. In a discussion about Oblivion's world, though, it's impossible to go without mentioning the soundtrack. Composed by Jeremy Soule, Oblivion's soundtrack, full of serene, tranquil pieces, is the perfect complement to its world, and it really helps immerse you in the fantasy experience. Exploring the vast wilderness or walking through the cozy towns of Cyrodiil just wouldn't feel right without Soule's music. Personally, I like it so much that throughout college I often listened to the soundtrack while I study. In fact, I even listened to it while writing this script. Now, I've spent some time talking about the peaceful fantasy world that Oblivion is known for, but really another part that makes it so special is how these bright landscapes and towns contrast with the game's dark caves and, of course, the hellish world of Oblivion that gives the game its title. There's a very clear effort by the developers to make these dungeons the exact opposite of the rest of the game. They're also dark and often full of hideous monsters like macabre undead zombies, massive ogres, and liches. Soule's work shines here as well, as his dark, ominous tracks really help set the tone and atmosphere for these spaces. Now, the second part of why I think Oblivion's so great is its writing. No, it doesn't have a dramatic story full of twists and turns and major difficult choices, but I think that Oblivion's writers did a good job of designing stories that fit the game. As an RPG with the central goal of allowing players to be whoever they want and do whatever they want within the game's world, it would be impossible for Oblivion to tell the kind of story that another game with maybe a more established protagonist could tell. Instead, Oblivion offers many different quest lines that players can pick from depending on how they want to roleplay as their character. Are you a warrior wanting to become the greatest gladiator in the world? You can join the arena faction. Do you want to be a thief and pull off one of the greatest heists in history? Join the Thieves Guild. Do you want to become a member of a secret assassin cult? Join the Dark Brotherhood. And beyond these longer form stories of the game, there are many individual quests that shine. Probably my favorite quest in the game is part of the Dark Brotherhood quest line, where you are an assassin invited to a party in which you must kill all of the guests. If you want to, you can just enter the house and kill everyone immediately without too much of a challenge. But you're incentivized by a special bonus reward if you can kill each person in secret. This is where the fun comes in, as there are so many options for you to take. You can speak to all the characters to get a sense of their personalities, and as you begin killing them off, you can keep talking to them to see how they react and theorize about who they think the killer is. In many cases, you can even trick people into thinking that one of the other guests is the killer, and they'll do the murder for you. Certainly a bit of a dark story, but I think it's such a good example of how Oblivion gives the reins over to the player and at its best gives the player the ability to make their own fun, interesting, and often whimsical stories. Still, as good as I can say the game is, you still have to ask, is it all just nostalgia? Certainly nostalgia must be such a big part of it. I mean, we can see today how nostalgia is something that video game companies capitalize on all the time. As I record this, the very recently released Oblivion remaster itself is taking the gaming world by storm, with its ability to take so many players back to the world that they first experienced in 2006. I certainly worked on me, as you can see the footage that's going on with this video right now. Nostalgia is real, and I feel it every time I go back to the game. It's really comforting in a way. When I play Oblivion, I can almost trick myself into thinking I'm still stuck in 2012 playing the game after school. However, I think that I've given some justification as to why I don't think that I only like Oblivion because of nostalgia. After all, I was introduced to the original Call of Duty and Modern Warfare at about the same time, and as much as I love that game and still maintain that it was the best Call of Duty of all time, I certainly don't go back to it nearly as much, and I don't have quite the same um, affection for it as I do Oblivion. Yes, Oblivion has its flaws, but they're not really what is important about the game. The Bethesda Game Studios of 2006 understood what made their game so special. I think so much of the reason that Bethesda's latest game, Starfield, was generally poorly received was because they lost sight of some of this. Sure, the gameplay is far improved, but I don't think that its procedurally generated worlds had the same character that Oblivion's handmade world did. Its quest didn't have the same creativity. Ultimately, Bethesda in Oblivion wasn't trying to create a revolutionary combat system or ultra engaging raw gameplay. They were set on creating a revolutionary, immersive world that players could live in. And that, in the end, is why I like Oblivion so much.